The case against 5 men accused of the murder of former Bafana Bafana goalkeeper Senzo Meyiwa will continue tomorrow in the Pretoria High Court. The first witness is expected to take the stand in the morning. This as the accused have pleaded not guilty to all the charges. The charges are murder, attempted murder, robbery with aggravated circumstances, and the illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. Legal expert Ulrich Roux joins me now to unpack this a little bit further for us, what we can expect from the trial. Ulrich, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. First and foremost, it has taken 8 years. It's a high-profile trial. Of course, a lot of these postponements and disruptions playing out in the public. Is this something that is normal within a murder trial of any nature, not necessarily a high-profile one?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. Yes, certainly, every case is obviously unique in its nature and unique in terms of the evidence that the police need to gather in order to present to a court in order to prove the charges against an accused. So in this instance, there was extensive investigations conducted by the South African Police Services. It took them some time to gather the relevant evidence and to put the docket together, but be that as it may, it is now ready to go on trial, and the matter will be starting tomorrow with the state calling its first witness. I don't think there should be too much read into the delay before the matter started. The police also need to conduct their investigations properly, and if that takes more time, then it takes more time. But the fact of the matter is that the state is now ready to proceed, and the accused have pleaded not guilty to the charges, and the state will be calling their first witnesses tomorrow, and the matter will then commence.
Yeah. What are the components that build up a case for common purpose? Because the state will want to argue that all these 5 men acted in common purpose. Of course, it's probably one of them that eventually held the gun and pulled the trigger, but all 5 being arrested acted on common purpose. What would be the building blocks of that case?
Yes, so the prosecutor who's prosecuting the matter indicated to the court on Friday that they were in possession of cell phone evidence and the circulation of the cell phone signals, showing that the 5 accused met at a certain location and that they derived a plan in order to carry out this crime, and they then executed that plan. They all worked together. There was, of course, only 2 men who entered the home of Senzo Meyiwa, but that the other 3 people conspired with them, and that they all, derived this plan together to commit this crime. So the state needs to prove that there was a meeting of the minds between them, and that there was a definite plan made by them and concocted by them, and that plan was carried out by 2 accused, but that it was in fact all 5 accused who are responsible for the crime, because it took all of their input and working together in order to plan this crime. So that's what the state will have to prove, that they all conspired together, they all had the necessary input in order to plan the crime, and that it was subsequently executed.
Now, there are some within the accused who have made confessions regarding what happened there. Will those have implications in the trial?
Yes, well, there are certain requirements for a confession to be admitted as evidence in court. It has to be made to a senior ranking police official or to a magistrate, and only once that is done and it is reduced to paper and signed in the form of an affidavit and then commissioned, will it then be seen as a proper confession. So one will have to wait and see whether these confessions do meet the requirements in terms of our law of evidence, and if they do, then definitely it will play a part. But if the accused contend that they in fact did not make these confessions, that they were forced to make them, that they were coerced into making them, or that they were not 100% aware of the ensuing aftermath after making that, then they will most likely try and prove to the court that the court should not be accepting that as a confession and that it should be disregarded. But one will have to wait and see whether the state can properly prove whether these confessions were made in accordance with our law of evidence or not.
So the lead prosecutor of the state saying there would be a trial within a trial regarding the confessions some of the accused are alleged to have made. And the judge here saying if these issues would bring about issues of integrity of the crime scene, to which the lead prosecutor responded yes. What do we read into that?
Well, a trial within a trial is where you conduct evidence in order to prove a certain legal point. As I said now, they will conduct a trial within a trial where pertinent evidence is led specifically to that aspect. And in this instance, it will be into whether the confessions made are valid or not. And once the presiding judge has reached the conclusion that either yes, it is acceptable, then it will be accepted, or the judge will make a finding that the confessions are not admissible, they do not comply with the requirements in terms of our Criminal Procedure Act, and will accordingly disregard it. Regarding the crime scene, evidence will have to be led by the initial police officers who arrived at the scene, whether the scene was secured properly, whether evidence was captured properly, and whether the right protocols were followed or not. The integrity of a crime scene must, of course, at all times be maintained. Things like removing evidence when you shouldn't, contaminating a crime scene with fingerprints or shoe prints, etc. These are all aspects that the police must be very aware of when they do arrive at a crime scene, and if the right protocols were not followed, then one can expect the defense to hammer down on that, and they do that in an attempt to create doubt pertaining to the evidence which was collected from that crime scene. So we will have to wait and see, what testimony the police officers leave when they arrived at the scene, and whether they did in fact maintain the integrity of that crime scene when they arrived and followed the proper protocols.
In your experience, cases of this nature stand or fall based on the integrity of the crime scene? I mean, could the integrity of a crime scene jeopardize this whole entire case?
Yes, so, we refer to what we call the chain of evidence, and the chain of evidence must be intact at all times. And what that means is that, for instance, in this case, a crime was committed at the residence in Vosloorus, and the police arrived. They gathered certain evidence, fingerprints, blood specimens, possible footprints, etc., etc. They then need to follow the chain of evidence in order to maintain the integrity of that evidence that they have gathered. So it must be properly captured. It must be, if it is something like a fingerprint, it must be captured in the proper way and then signed and sealed in an evidence bag. And that evidence bag must be signed into what we call a SAP 13 storage facility at the police station that has jurisdiction over the matter. It must then be signed out of that storage facility into the relevant laboratory where the relevant tests are conducted in order to determine the integrity of the fingerprints. And only after that will a report then be composed or compiled in order to present to court. So, the chain of evidence is very important, and most certainly in many matters that I've been involved with, if the chain of evidence is not intact, then we as defense attorneys hammer down on that, and we attack that, because if there's any doubt created pertaining to the evidence gathered by the police, and that has a severe effect on the strength of the police case, and one can expect the same in this matter, and one can expect the defense attorneys to really hammer down on the police, whether they conducted themselves appropriately when they arrived at that crime scene, and whether the evidence that was collected and is going to be presented in court was done so in the proper fashion and the proper way.
Ulrich Roux, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on Real Expert there. Ulrich Roux helping us in that conversation.